Hello and welcome to The Essential Reads. My name is Isaac and my goal is to bring to you a bunch of classic audiobooks in an easy and accessible way. We are continuing with Wuthering Heights by Emily Brontë, and this is chapter 16. About 12 o'clock that night was born the Catherine you saw at Wuthering Heights, a puny 7 months child. And 2 hours after, the mother died, having never recovered sufficient consciousness to miss Heathcliff or know Edgar. The latter's distraction at his bereavement is a subject too painful to be dwelt on. Its after-effects showed how deep the sorrow sunk. A great addition, in my eyes, was his being left without an heir. I bemoaned that as I gazed on the feeble orphan, and I mentally abused old Linton for, what was only natural partiality, the securing his estate to his own daughter instead of his son. An unwelcomed infant it was, poor thing. It might have wailed out of life, and nobody cared a morsel during those first hours of existence. We redeemed the neglect afterwards, but its beginning was as friendless as its end is likely to be. The next morning, bright and cheerful out of doors, still softened in through the blinds of the silent room, and suffused the couch and its occupant with a mellow, tender glow. Edgar Linton had his head laid on the pillow, and his eyes shut. His young and fair features were almost as deathlike as those of the form beside him, and almost as fixed. But his was the hush of exhausted anguish, and hers of perfect peace. Her brow smooth, her lids closed, her lips wearing the expression of a smile. No angel in heaven could be more beautiful than she appeared, and I took part of the infinite calm in which she lay. My mind was never in a holier frame than while I gazed on that untroubled image of divine rest. I instinctively echoed the words she had uttered a few hours before. Incomparably beyond and above us all, whether still on earth or now in heaven, her spirit is at home with God. I don't know if it be a peculiarity in me, but I am seldom otherwise happy while watching the chamber of death, should no frenzied or despairing mourner share the duty with me. I see a repose neither earth nor hell can break, and I feel an assurance of the endless and shadowless hereafter, the eternity they have entered, where life is boundless in its duration, and love in its sympathy, and joy in its fullness. I noticed on that occasion how much selfishness there is in a love like Mr. Linton's, when he so regretted Catherine's blessed release. To be sure, one might have doubted, after the wayward and impatient existence she had led, whether she merited a haven of peace at last. One might doubt in seasons of cold reflection, but not then, in the presence of her corpse. It asserted its own tranquillity, which seemed a pledge of equal quiet to its former inhabitant. Do you believe such people are happy in the other world, sir? I'd give a great deal to know. I declined answering Mrs. Dean's question, which struck me as something heterodox. She proceeded. Retracing the course of Catherine Linton, I fear we have no sight to think she is. But we'll leave her with the Maker. The master looked asleep, and I ventured soon after sunrise to quit the room and steal out to the pure refreshing air. The servants thought me gone to shake off the drowsiness of my protracted watch. In reality, my chief motive was seeing Mr. Heathcliff. If he had remained among the larches all night, he would have heard nothing of the stir at the Grange. Unless, perhaps, he might catch the gallop of the messenger going to Gimmerton. If he had come nearer, he would probably be aware, from the lights flittering to and fro, and from the opening and shutting of the outer doors, that all was not right within. I wished, yet feared, to find him. I felt the terrible news must be told, and I longed to get it over. But how to do it, I did not know. He was there, at least a few yards further in the park, leant against an old ash tree, his hat off and his hair soaked with the dew that had gathered on the budded branches, and fell pattering around him. He had been standing a long time in that position, for I saw a pair of owls passing and repassing scarcely 3 feet from him, busy in building their nests, and regarding his proximity no more than that of a piece of timber. They flew off at my approach. He raised his eyes and spoke. "Cathy, she's dead," he said. "I've not waited for you to learn that. Push your handkerchief away. Don't snivel before me. Damn you all, she wanted none of your tears." I was weeping as much for him as her. We do sometimes pity the creatures that have none of the feelings either for themselves or others. And when I first looked into his face, I perceived that he had got intelligence of the catastrophe. And a foolish notion struck me that his heart was quelled, and he prayed, because his lips moved and his gaze was bent on the ground. "Yes, she's dead," I answered, checking my sobs and drying my cheeks. "Gone to heaven, I hope, where we may, everyone, join her, if we take due warning and leave our evil ways to follow good." "Did she take due warnings then?" asked Heathcliff, attempting to sneer. "Did she die like a saint? Come, give me a true history of the event. How did... He endeavoured to pronounce the name, but he could not manage it. And compressing his mouth, he held a silent combat with his inward agony, defying, meanwhile, my sympathy with an unflinching, ferocious stare. "How did she die?" he resumed at last, fain, notwithstanding his hardihood, to have a support behind him, for, after the struggle, he trembled, in spite of himself, to his very finger ends. "Poor wretch," I thought. "You have a heart and nerves the same as your brother men. Why should you be so anxious to conceal them? Your pride cannot blind God. You tempt him to wring them till he forces a cry of humiliation." "Quietly as a lamb," I answered aloud. She drew a sigh and stretched herself, like a child reviving and sinking again to sleep. And 5 minutes after, I felt one little pulse at her heart, and nothing more. "And did she ever mention me?" he asked, hesitating, as if he dreaded the answer to his question would induce details that he could not bear to hear. "Her senses never returned. She recognised nobody from the time you left," I said. "She lies with a sweet smile on her face, and her latest ideas wandered back to pleasant early days. Her life closed in a gentle dream. May she wake as kindly in another world." "May she wake in torment!" he cried, with frightful vehemence, stamping his foot and groaning in a sudden paroxysm of ungovernable passion. "Why, she's a liar to the end! Where is she? Not there! Not in heaven! Not perished! Where? Oh, you said you cared nothing for my sufferings. And I pray one prayer. I repeat it till my tongue stiffens. Catherine Earnshaw, may you not rest as long as I am living. You said I killed you. Haunt me then. The murdered do haunt their murderers. I believe, I know that ghosts have wandered on earth. Be with me always. Take any form, drive me mad. Only do not leave me in this abyss, for I cannot find you. God, it's unutterable. I cannot live my life. I cannot live without my soul." He dashed his head against the knotted trunk, and, lifting up his eyes, howled, not like a madman, but like a savage beast getting goaded to death with knives and spears. I observed several splashes of blood about the bark of the tree, and his hand and forehead were both stained. Probably the scene I witnessed was a repetition of others acted during the night. It hardly moved my compassion. It appalled me. Still, I felt reluctant to quit him so. But the moment he recollected himself to notice me watching, he thundered a command for me to go, and I obeyed. He was beyond my skill to quiet or console. Mrs. Linton's funeral was appointed to take place on the Friday following her decease. Until then, her coffin remained uncovered and strewn with flowers and scented leaves in the great drawing-room. Linton spent his days and nights there, a sleepless guardian, and, a circumstance concealed from all but me, Heathcliff spent his nights, at least, outside, equally a stranger to repose. I held no communication with him. Still, I was conscious of his design to enter, if he could. And on the Tuesday, a little after dark, when my master, from sheer fatigue, had been compelled to retire a couple of hours, I went and opened one of the windows, moved by his presence to give him a chance of bestowing on the fading image of his idol one final adieu. He did not omit to avail himself of the opportunity, cautiously and briefly, too cautiously to betray his presence by the slightest noise. Indeed, I shouldn't have discovered that he had been there, except for the derangement of the drapery about the corpse's face, and for observing on the floor a curl of light hair, fastened with a silver thread, which, on examination, I ascertained to have been taken from a locket hung round Catherine's neck. Heathcliff had opened the trinket and cast out its contents, replacing them by a black lock of his own. I twisted the two and enclosed them together. Mr. Earnshaw was, of course, invited to attend the remains of his sister to the grave, and he sent no excuse, but he never came, so that, besides her husband, the mourners were wholly composed of tenants and servants. Isabella was not asked. The place of Catherine's interment, to the surprise of the villagers, was neither in the chapel, under the carved monument of the Lintons, nor yet by the tombs of her own relations outside. It was dug on a green slope in the corner of the kirkyard, where the wall is so low that heath and bilberry plants have climbed over it from the moor, and peat mould almost buries it. Her husband lies in the same spot now, and they have each a simple headstone above, and a plain grey block at their feet to mark the graves. Thank you so very much for listening. If you enjoyed, please like, comment, share all that jazz, and if you really enjoyed, do subscribe, because there is more to come. We're only about halfway through, not even halfway through the book yet, so please stick around. Or maybe just halfway, I don't know. It's like 32 or 34 something chapters. This is chapter 15, so nearly there. But it means plenty of book left. If you're listening on podcast, please leave a review, as it helps get this in front of as many people as possible, and reading your reviews really makes my day. If you want to support the show further, you can click up here on the screen now on YouTube, where you'll see a link to Ko-Fi. Or you can find the link to that in the episode notes on podcast platforms, and also the description box on YouTube. And it's just like an extra way to support me, because I don't get paid for podcast listens, I only get paid for YouTube watches. So if you want to support me further, you can please do that, and it will be most welcome. Once again, thank you very, very much for listening, and until next time, bye-bye.